I mean, what Bitcoin does is not fathomable for me. I came out on The Good Wife and said Bitcoin should be bought at 200, and I'm on record. Who else said that it should be bought at 200?
We are now entering a further and radical evolution of how we interact and trade. Because for the first time, we can lower uncertainty not just with political and economic institutions like our banks, our corporations, our governments, but we can do it with technology alone. So what is the blockchain? Blockchain technology is a decentralized database that stores a registry of assets and transactions across a peer-to-peer network. It's basically a public registry of who owns what and who transacts what. The transactions are secured through cryptography, and over time, that transaction history gets locked in blocks of data that are then cryptographically linked together and secured. This creates an immutable, unforgeable record of all of the transactions across this network. This record is replicated on every computer that uses the network. It's not an app, it's not a company. I think it's closest in description to something like Wikipedia. On Wikipedia, it's an open platform that stores words and images and the changes to that data over time. On the blockchain, you can think of it as an open infrastructure that stores many kinds of assets. It stores the history of custodianship, ownership, and location for assets like the digital currency Bitcoin, other digital assets, like a title of ownership of IP. It could be a certificate, a contract, real-world objects, even personal identifiable information. At its core, that's how it works. It's this public registry that stores transactions in a network and is replicated so that it's very secure and hard to tamper with.
When I tell people to think about 2020, I'm telling them not to sell all their stuff in 2020. I'm not selling it in 2020. I'm saying that there are a lot of short-term temptations in the Bitcoin space. And I put a date, a long-term date in the future, which is 2020. And that's not a random date. That is the year of the Bitcoin halving, when the amount of Bitcoin mined will be cut in half. That happens every 4 years. We just had it in 2016, and the price doubled leading up to that. There is going to be no massive sell-off then or anything like that. Adam Meister is not selling off anything then. That is just a long-term goal. And there's so many short-term thinkers out there that are going to panic every single dip they see in Bitcoin that they're going to forget that goal. So that the people who stick with this just really simple hold strategy are going to be rewarded in the long run. All the risk takers who do these impulsive things, hey man, they're going to regret it. Our first interview ever, what was Bitcoin around 1,700? I don't even know. But so it's gone up such an incredible amount. And the people who benefited most are the people who've done nothing. I mean, it's that simple. $4,000 per annum now.
The buying power of Bitcoin is determined in exactly the same way that the buying power of the euro, the British sterling, the Japanese yen, or the US dollar is determined through market forces of supply and demand in international liquid markets that operate around the clock. One of the fundamental differences is that Bitcoin trading never ceases. Has been going continuously for 7 years. The network never stops. Every 10 minutes, Bitcoin's heart beats and transactions are processed. The exchanges never close. There is no closing price for Bitcoin. It is a rolling average. And in that trading, a market capitalization of approximately $12 billion is now traded internationally. What is $12 billion for a global currency? It's a guppy swimming in shark-infested waters. And every trader, every whale goes in there and just kicks that price around. Right now, the experience of living on Bitcoin, which I have been doing full-time for more than 3 years, is a roller coaster. I've seen shifts of 20 or 30% in a day. And yet, if you look at the long-term trend, volume goes up, transactions go up, and volatility keeps dropping. And the beauty of it is, I can't sell that to an American. I can't sell that to a Brit. I don't need to sell it to an Argentinian. I don't need to sell it to a Brazilian. I don't need to sell it to a Venezuelan. I went to a conference and an Argentinian told me, I'm not worried about volatility. Our currency has volatility like this. Bitcoin has volatility like this. I'd rather be going in that direction.
Yesterday, my podcast was called Gold's Win-Win Scenarios in the upcoming hyperinflationary explosion. So I'm not worried about that. And again, I just mentioned before, not competitors at all. Gold is a wealth storage asset. Bitcoin is a monetary system, a protocol that's going to change the world. Gold's not changing the world. Gold is what it always has been, a wealth storage asset, which thanks to Bitcoin will probably be in more demand.
For the first time in humanity, we now have a digital currency that is information-based, but has definitive transferable value. That means that I can give you some of my digital currency for you to have it, of which I no longer have it. And this mimics the physical reality, physical world, where I can give you a glass of beer and you will have it and I don't have it anymore. Does that make sense? This is not hocus pocus. This is not virtual currencies of the 1980s and 1990s, okay? We're talking about cryptocurrencies. That's why Bitcoin is different. I have a pre-release of a new physical Bitcoin. In this case, it's physical. I could toss it to you, and then it'll be physical, you catch it. But it's truly valuable because once I toss it to you, it's out of my hands, and that's what Bitcoin does electronically, but we made it in physical format. Why is this valuable other than the piece of metal? It's got uniquely great features. So until Bitcoin was invented, nothing in the world was able to encapsulate the functionality, the feature set that Bitcoin gave us. Where in physical, we could give you money, gold, we can give you stocks or bonds, give you a house and so on, or title to a house. But with Bitcoin, now we can have a global network for payments with a fixed supply of Bitcoins, 21 million. We can have a decentralized payment. What that means is the Bitcoin that I give you does not depend on some company telling you how many Bitcoins you own.
So Bitcoin, now more than 2,000, would have been inconceivable 5 years ago. In fact, if you had even suggested this, you would have been laughed out town, called reckless and irresponsible and all of those things that folks are called when they look into the future and take any asset and say, oh, it could someday be trading at many multiples of today's price. But what do we know about Bitcoins? There is, theoretically at least, infinite upside. Most stocks are usually ultimately tied to cash flow. Apple, most profitable company out there, its stock trades in relation to the amount of cash it generates. Bitcoin doesn't have that problem. If folks decide that Bitcoin should be worth $1 gazillion a coin, ultimately it can be. There's nothing holding it back. I heard about Bitcoin for the first time about 4 or 5 years ago when I was sitting around a dinner table with a bunch of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. At that dinner, Bitcoin was worth 30. Everybody thought that was insane because it was up from 10 a year or two earlier. Everybody got rich, couldn't go any higher. By the time I got back to New York and Business Insider to write about this, Bitcoin was already 90. My belief is that the key for Bitcoin going forward, if it's going to continue to appreciate, is usage. As long as folks are actually transacting in Bitcoin, that is a good sign that the use of Bitcoin and the adoption of Bitcoin is likely to spread. So I think actually this is the most important chart for Bitcoin, which is the transactions per day globally. And what you see is that it continues to increase. It's not steady, quite volatile, but the trend is up. And that very much is a vote of confidence for the fact that people will want Bitcoin and use it going forward. And if that is the case, then the price can continue to go up.
Coulda, shoulda, woulda, Kennedy. That's what I think of. I have one Bitcoin, but even as the stock market hits all-time highs, really the hottest investment on or off Wall Street, as you pointed out, are these cryptocurrencies. They are soaring like nothing we've ever seen before in their history.
A lot of people are just seeing the charts and thinking, how high will it go? But what I'm doing is counting backwards. I mean, this is a transactional currency and it is a store of value. As such, it is a product and a service competing on a very tangible market for stores of value and for transactional currencies. So what is the size of that market?
Right. And this is important.
And how big a market share can Bitcoin realistically take within a foreseeable time frame? Right. When you ask that question, then you come up with a market cap of Bitcoin total, and then you divide that by the number of Bitcoin in circulation by your estimated time, and seeing how Chinese are buying Bitcoin like crazy. I actually had to adjust this number upwards, but then you come up with a number of about $2 to $5 million per Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. No. Bear Stearns is fine. Do not take your money out.